My girlfriend destroyed my car because she saw me with a woman and thought I was cheating on her, but it was the organizer of our upcoming wedding, which was supposed to be a surprise. I had been dating Jessica for 5 years, and I was ready to propose in a big way. I wanted to plan a surprise proposal and wedding all in one. It was ambitious, but I wanted it to be perfect. To make it happen, I hired Anna, a wedding planner with a reputation for pulling off stunning events. I felt a mix of excitement and nerves, imagining Jessica's reaction when she'd realized that not only was I proposing, but that our wedding day would be happening right then and there. For weeks, Anna and I worked together closely, meeting often to finalize every detail. The planning became intense, choosing the venue, coordinating with caterers, picking the flowers. It was harder to keep everything hidden than I expected. Jessica started noticing my secretive behavior, often catching me whispering on the phone or sneaking around. She'd ask, "Is everything okay? You seem distracted." I'd force a smile and reassure her, "Just work stuff. Nothing to worry about." But deep down, I knew she was getting suspicious. Despite the close calls, Anna and I managed to nail down the plan. The venue was set, the guest list complete, and the rings were being prepared. My favorite part of the plan was that Jessica's family and closest friends were all in on it. I made them swear to keep it a secret. One afternoon, as Anna and I met in a cafe to finalize the guest list, we were interrupted by a commotion outside. I glanced up and noticed Jessica's car passing by the cafe window. I quickly ducked, praying she wouldn't see us together. But before I could figure out how to explain this meeting if she did spot us, she sped away. Little did I know, that brief moment was about to spark a massive misunderstanding, one that would send everything spiraling in a direction I never anticipated. Anna and I had met up in a cafe parking lot to finalize some details for the surprise wedding. The back seat of my car was loaded with wedding invitations, sample floral arrangements, and a large seating chart. We spread everything across the trunk and leaned in to discuss the finer details. It was one of our last meetings before the big day, and I was starting to feel the thrill of anticipation. As we were chatting, I caught sight of Jessica's car approaching. I reflexively waved, but her gaze seemed locked on us, specifically on Anna, who was holding a bouquet of roses meant for the wedding. Jessica's expression was unreadable, but before I could figure out what to do, she accelerated and sped off, leaving me confused. "Do you think she saw us?" Anna asked, sensing my sudden panic. "Probably," I replied, "but I'll handle it." I reassured myself that Jessica wouldn't jump to any conclusions. I was wrong. When I got home that evening, I noticed Jessica's strange behavior right away. She was unusually quiet, barely responding to my attempts at conversation. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to break the ice. "Fine," she replied curtly, her eyes fixed on the TV. The next day, things got worse. She avoided eye contact, mumbled short responses, and seemed to be deliberately keeping her distance. It was like a cold front had settled over our house. I chalked it up to work stress and figured she'd eventually tell me what was bothering her. But Jessica's silence was anything but ordinary. While I was trying to surprise her with the happiest moment of our lives, she was convinced I was betraying her. She didn't confront me. Instead, she began plotting something of her own, a form of revenge that would leave me completely blindsided. The misunderstanding I feared had begun, and the consequences were about to hit harder than I could have imagined. The next morning, I walked into the parking lot, feeling pretty good about how the wedding plans were coming along. But that feeling vanished instantly when I saw my car. It was a total disaster. Every window was shattered, the paint was gouged with deep scratches, and all 4 tires were flat. It looked like something out of a revenge movie, and I stood there, stunned, unable to process what I was seeing. I tried to wrap my head around it, but then I saw Jessica approaching. Her eyes were blazing, her fists clenched, and before I could say anything, she was right in front of me, shouting at the top of her lungs. "You think I wouldn't find out?" she screamed. "You think you can sneak around behind my back, meeting up with some other woman, and I just accept it?" "Jessica, calm down," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the chaos around us. "It's not what you think. Don't you dare lie to me." She cut me off, her voice cracking with a mix of anger and pain. "I saw you with her. I saw you with that woman, laughing and smiling, like I didn't even exist." I was completely at a loss for words. The woman she was talking about was Anna, the wedding planner, but there was no way she'd believe me in this state. "Jessica, listen to me," I pleaded. "Her name is Anna. She's not just some woman. She's a wedding planner. I hired her to help plan a surprise for you." But she wasn't hearing any of it. "How dumb do you think I am, Nick?" she shouted. "You're making this up to cover your tracks. You think throwing the word wedding around is going to fix everything? She stormed off before I could respond, leaving me standing there in front of my ruined car, feeling more helpless than ever. I couldn't believe that a misunderstanding had led to this much damage, both to my car and to my relationship. As I watched Jessica disappear around the corner, I realized I needed a different approach. Words alone wouldn't work. I had to show her the truth. But how? I only had one option left. I had to involve Anna, hoping that she could help me salvage what was left of my surprise plan before everything fell apart completely. That night, I called Jessica repeatedly, but she ignored every call. I sent texts trying to explain, but they all went unanswered. Panic started to set in, not just about the damage to my car, but the damage to our relationship. The whole surprise proposal and wedding, the plan that had taken months to prepare, was now falling apart because of one misunderstanding. With no other option, I reached out to Anna. I explained the situation, from Jessica spotting us at the cafe to the wrecked car and her belief that I was cheating. Anna was shocked. "I can't believe this happened over a misunderstanding," she said. "Of course, I'll help. Just tell me what to do." We agreed that Anna would meet Jessica in person. We hoped that hearing the truth directly from Anna would make Jessica realize that I wasn't lying. The next day, I sent a message to Jessica. "I know you're hurt and upset, but please meet with Anna. She's the wedding planner I hired to surprise you, and she can explain everything. Just give it one chance." After what felt like hours, I finally got a response. "Fine. One chance." I breathed a sigh of relief, knowing it wasn't much, but it was a start. I coordinated a meeting between Anna and Jessica at a local cafe. I stayed away, figuring it would be best if Anna spoke to Jessica alone. I paced my apartment, checking my phone every few minutes, waiting for any kind of update. 2 hours later, I received a text from Jessica. "Come over. We need to talk." My heart pounded as I drove to her place. I had no idea what to expect. Was she ready to hear me out? Or was this the end of everything? When I arrived, Jessica was sitting on the porch, her eyes red from crying. I approached her slowly, feeling the tension in the air. "I spoke with Anna," she began, her voice shaky. "She told me everything." I sat down next to her, my heart still heavy. "Jessica, I'm so sorry for all of this. I should have been more open, but I was trying to make it a surprise." She looked at me, tears in her eyes. "I can't believe I let my jealousy get the best of me. I thought you were cheating. I didn't think you'd be planning a wedding." We sat there in silence for a moment, the weight of the misunderstanding sinking in. There was still a lot to fix, but at least now, the truth was out in the open. Jessica looked visibly shaken as she sat across from Anna at the cafe. Her eyes were red and puffy, still burning with anger, but mixed with uncertainty. It was clear that she wasn't quite ready to let down her guard. "I don't know what to think anymore," Jessica admitted, her voice cracking. "I feel like I don't even know him." Anna took a deep breath, her tone calm but urgent. "Jessica, I'm not here to defend him as a cheater, because he isn't one. I'm here to explain what really happened. Mark hired me to plan a surprise proposal and a wedding." Jessica's eyes went wide, disbelief written all over her face. "A wedding?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Yes," Anna confirmed, sliding a folder across the table. Inside were seating charts, invitations with Jessica's name elegantly embossed, and floral arrangements picked to match her favorite colors. "This is all for you," Anna continued. "Mark wanted to make it unforgettable, so he kept everything secret. The meeting you saw at the cafe was just a final review of the details." Jessica's hand covered her mouth as she flipped through the documents, each one proof of my intentions. Tears filled her eyes, and she looked up at Anna, her voice shaking. "I can't believe this. I thought he was with you." Anna shook her head gently. "I understand why it might have looked that way, but I assure you, it was never anything romantic between us. Mark's only focus has been you. He's been working so hard to make sure everything was perfect." Jessica's tears flowed freely now, her sobs filled with regret. "I've ruined everything, haven't I?" she whispered. "I destroyed his car. I accused him of cheating. How can he ever forgive me?" Anna reached out, placing a comforting hand on Jessica's arm. "You need to talk to him. He loves you, Jessica." This whole situation came from a place of misunderstanding, but it's not too late to make things right. Jessica nodded, trying to compose herself. "I need to see him," she said, determination mixed with guilt in her voice. "I need to apologize and fix this." After leaving the cafe, Jessica sent me a text. "I know everything now. I'm so sorry. Can we talk?" When I saw the message, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. The truth was finally clear, but the damage was still real. I headed over to her place. unsure of what would come next. I found her waiting for me, eyes swollen from crying, her posture hesitant but hopeful. "I know now," she said softly, tears threatening to spill again. "I know what you were planning, and I know how much I messed up." I stood there, taking it all in. The woman I loved, who had just shattered my trust, was now standing in front of me, vulnerable and broken by her own assumptions. "It was all for you, Jess," I said, my voice low but steady. "Everything was for you." She reached out, her hands trembling. "Can we fix this?" she asked, her voice raw with emotion. "I love you, Mark. I was so scared of losing you that I didn't think clearly. I'm so sorry for everything." I looked into her eyes, filled with both pain and genuine remorse. "I still love you too," I admitted. "But we need to take it slow. We have a lot to rebuild." Jessica nodded, tears falling again, but this time they were mixed with a glimmer of hope. "I understand," she whispered. "I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." When Jessica walked through the door that night, she looked broken. Her eyes were red, and her shoulders slumped under the weight of guilt. I stood up from the couch, unsure of what to expect. The air between us was thick with a mess of misunderstandings and shattered trust. She took a deep breath, tears welling up again as she spoke. "I'm so sorry, Mark. I know words can't fix what I've done, but I need you to know that I truly regret it." Her voice cracked as she continued. "I let my jealousy control me, and I jumped to conclusions without even talking to you first. I know how much I've hurt you, and I don't expect you to forgive me right away." I nodded slowly, the anger and betrayal still simmering beneath the surface, but something in her voice, something raw and real, made me soften. "I get why you thought what you did," I said quietly. "It looked bad from your perspective, and I wasn't exactly forthcoming about all my sneaking around with Anna. But Jess, it was all for us. I wanted to give you the surprise of a lifetime, not drive you to this." Jessica's tears spilled over, and she took a hesitant step forward. "I know, and it's not just about the wedding planning. It's about my own insecurities. I thought you were slipping away, and instead of talking to you, I let my fears take over. It was wrong, and I see that now." We stood there, both unsure of how to close the gap that had opened between us. I felt a rush of mixed emotions, anger, sadness, and strangely enough, love. The woman standing before me was flawed, but so was I. We had both made mistakes, but deep down I still wanted the same thing, a future together. "I was hurt, Jess," I admitted, my voice rough with emotion. "Seeing my car like that, knowing you could think I'd betray you like that, it broke something inside me. But I also know I wasn't being as open as I should have been. I should have found a better way to involve you, even if it was supposed to be a surprise." Jessica stepped closer, reaching out tentatively. "I know I have a lot to make up for," she whispered, "but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to rebuild your trust. I love you, and I don't want to lose you." We hugged, both of us clinging to each other as if trying to erase the pain of the past few days. It was a small step, but it was a step toward healing. As we stood there, I realized that the road ahead wasn't going to be easy. Trust isn't something that can be repaired overnight. But for the first time since the chaos began, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. That night, we talked more openly than we had in months. We laid everything on the table. Our fears, our insecurities, and the mistakes we'd both made along the way. It wasn't pretty, and it wasn't perfect, but it was honest. We agreed to focus on the present, to put the wedding plans on hold, and to concentrate on repairing our relationship. For the first time, it felt like we were truly starting over. And despite everything, I knew that this chapter wasn't the end of us. It was just a painful, necessary reset. After the dust settled, I knew that the surprise wedding needed to be paused. It was clear that Jessica and I needed to prioritize our relationship, not a rushed walk down the aisle. I told Jessica about the decision one evening over dinner, trying to choose my words carefully. "I think we need to put the wedding plans on hold for now," I said, watching her expression carefully. "Not because I don't want to marry you, but because we need to rebuild what's been broken first." She looked down, nodding slowly. "I agree. I can't believe I almost destroyed everything. I need to work on myself before we can think about a wedding." It was a painful truth, but an honest one. We had hurt each other, me by not being transparent, and her by jumping to conclusions and taking drastic measures. We needed time to heal before committing to something as monumental as marriage. We decided to start couples counseling to help us navigate the rocky terrain. The sessions were challenging, often forcing us to face parts of ourselves that were easier to ignore. Jessica talked about her insecurities, admitting that she had always feared being abandoned. Meanwhile, I acknowledged that I could be too secretive, even when my intentions were good. The counselor helped us understand the patterns that had led to the misunderstanding, encouraging us to be more open and communicative with each other. Trust is like a bridge, the therapist explained during one session. If one side of the bridge is weak, the whole structure suffers. You both need to support it equally, or it will collapse. Those words stuck with me. I realized that while I had meant well with the surprise, I had unintentionally built a wall between us. My secretive planning had added fuel to Jessica's deep-rooted fears, and it was something I had to take responsibility for. Jessica, on her part, worked hard on managing her jealousy. She reached out to friends for support and even started journaling to process her feelings instead of bottling them up. There were still moments when old insecurities would creep back in, but she was learning to voice her concerns instead of assuming the worst. Despite the slow and sometimes painful process, we were making progress. We started small, more open conversations, scheduled date nights, and a lot of patience. It wasn't about grand gestures anymore. It was about rebuilding trust one step at a time. For me, the biggest change was learning to be more vulnerable. I had always believed that surprises and big gestures were the best way to show my love, but I was beginning to understand that emotional honesty and everyday transparency were just as, if not more, important. I started sharing more about my day-to-day life, letting Jessica in on the mundane details that had once seemed unimportant. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Jessica leaned her head on my shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for not giving up on us." I squeezed her hand gently. "We've both got a lot to learn, but I'm not going anywhere." The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of hope. We weren't trying to rush toward a wedding anymore. We were focusing on something even more important, building a strong foundation for our future together. And while the wedding plans were put on hold, our commitment to each other wasn't. We both knew that this was just the beginning of a longer journey. But we were in it together, and that made all the difference. The process of rebuilding trust was long and challenging. After everything that had happened, there were moments when the past would resurface, reminding us of how quickly things had fallen apart. But instead of letting fear take over, Jessica and I chose to face it head-on. We kept up with the couple's counseling, making steady progress. One of the major lessons we learned was the importance of open communication. If something fell off, we promised to talk about it instead of assuming the worst. This was a big step for Jessica, who admitted that her tendency to bottle up her feelings had fueled her impulsive reaction. For me, it was about being less secretive, even when I thought I was protecting her. One night, during a quiet dinner at home, Jessica brought up the topic that had been lingering between us since the incident. "Do you think you can ever truly forgive me for what I did?" she asked hesitantly, her voice filled with vulnerability. I paused, thinking carefully about my response. "It's not about forgetting what happened," I said gently. "But I do forgive you. I know why you reacted the way you did. And I think the real question is whether we can learn from it and move forward together." Jessica's eyes softened, and she nodded. "I want that more than anything." We took small steps to rebuild our connection. We started going out more, not just for counseling sessions, but for fun. We revisited old favorite spots, places that reminded us of happier times. There were spontaneous late-night drives, hikes to clear our minds, and dinners where we'd reminisce about the early days of our relationship, laughing over shared memories. One evening, I came home to find Jessica standing in the kitchen with a small, gift-wrapped box in her hands. "I got you something," she said shyly. I opened it to find a framed photo of us at our favorite beach spot, taken during a spontaneous trip 2 years earlier. Tucked behind the frame was a handwritten note. "For every moment I almost lost, I promised to cherish the ones we still have." The gesture was simple, but it was incredibly meaningful. I pulled her into a tight hug, feeling the weight of her words. "This means everything to me," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. It wasn't just a gift. It was a promise, a tangible symbol of our commitment to rebuilding the trust we had broken. We still had our struggles. There were times when I'd catch Jessica's eyes flickering with doubt if I got home a little later than expected. And there were moments when I felt hesitant to surprise her, afraid of unintentionally triggering old fears. But each time, we chose to communicate. We'd talk through it, reminding each other of how far we'd come and the effort we were both putting in. As we continued to heal, I noticed a change in Jessica. She seemed lighter, less burdened by her past mistakes. She was more open about her feelings, not just about us, but about everything in her life. And I, in turn, found it easier to be vulnerable, to share my thoughts and worries without the fear of being misunderstood. One night, as we lay in bed, Jessica turned to me and asked, "Do you think we'll ever be ready for the wedding again?" I thought for a moment, then answered honestly, "I don't know when, but I do know that we're on the right path. When the time is right, we'll both feel it." She smiled softly. "I'm okay with that." It wasn't the grand wedding I had initially planned, but in that moment, I realized it didn't matter. We were building something stronger than any surprise proposal, a foundation built on honesty, love, and mutual effort. And that was more important than any elaborate event. We were finally moving forward one step at a time, and it felt like a new beginning. It had been nearly a year since the chaotic events that tore us apart and slowly brought us back together. Jessica and I were stronger, our bond deeper than before. We had learned to navigate the complexities of trust, commitment, and open communication, and it felt like we were finally ready for the next step. This time, I knew the proposal had to be different. It had to be simple, honest, and true to who we had become. I decided to take Jessica to the spot where we had our very first date, a cozy little bistro that served her favorite dish, chicken Alfredo, and had just the right mix of charm and nostalgia. The night was perfect. We spent the evening reminiscing about our early days, laughing about the awkward moments that had eventually turned into cherished memories. Jessica was glowing, her smile bright, and I could see the warmth in her eyes. It was the kind of moment that felt right, like everything had come full circle. After dinner, we took a stroll through the nearby park, the one where we'd shared our first kiss. We sat on the bench where we had once joked about our future together, back when things were simpler. It felt surreal to be there again, knowing everything we had gone through to get here. As the soft glow of the streetlights reflected off the lake nearby, I knew it was the right time. I took a deep breath, reached into my pocket, and pulled out the ring, the same one I had planned to surprise her with months ago, but had kept safely hidden ever since. "Jessica," I said, getting down on one knee. Her eyes widened, her hand covering her mouth in surprise. "We've been through a lot, more than I ever imagined we would. But through it all, I've never stopped loving you. I know we've both made mistakes, but we've also found a way back to each other. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. This time with no surprises, no secrets. Will you marry me?" Tears filled Jessica's eyes, and for a moment, she couldn't speak. But then a smile broke through, and she whispered, "Yes." It wasn't just a word. It was a promise, a testament to everything we had rebuilt. I slipped the ring on her finger, and we stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, laughing through the tears of joy. It was nothing like the elaborate proposal I had planned before, but it was perfect in its simplicity. It was real, just like us. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Jessica said softly as we held each other. "Yeah, we really have," I agreed, kissing her gently. "And I wouldn't change a thing." As we walked back to the car, hand in hand, Jessica turned to me with a playful smile. "So, are we still going to have that big wedding you planned?" I chuckled. "Only if you promise not to destroy my car this time." Jessica laughed, the sound filled with relief and love. "Deal." We decided to keep our wedding simple, a stark contrast to the extravagant surprise I had once envisioned. This time, we both wanted something that felt true to us, small, intimate, and full of the people who had supported us through the roller coaster of our relationship. It wasn't about flashy decorations or a grand reveal anymore. It was about celebrating love that had been tested and come out stronger. We chose a quiet venue, a rustic garden with soft string lights and rows of lavender bushes. It was charming and warm, just like Jessica. As we finalized the plans, I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. We were doing this right, not just with the ceremony, but with everything we had learned along the way. When the big day arrived, it was everything we hoped it would be. Jessica looked breathtaking in a simple lace dress, and I could barely hold back my tears as she walked down the aisle, a wide smile on her face. There was no dramatic music, no over-the-top setup, just the sound of our closest friends and family cheering as she made her way to me. As we stood before our loved ones, the officiant asked us to exchange vows. I looked into Jessica's eyes, seeing not just the woman I was marrying, but the partner who had been through everything with me. Good, bad, and even a bit crazy. "Jessica," I began, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "I've always believed that love should be a grand adventure. But I've learned that the real adventure isn't in surprises or big moments. It's in the everyday moments, the conversations, the mistakes, and the forgiveness. I promise to always be honest, to communicate openly, and to never forget how far we've come. Jessica's eyes shimmered with tears. She took a deep breath and started her vows, her voice soft but full of conviction. I've learned that love isn't always perfect, but it's worth fighting for. I promise to trust you, to believe in us, and to keep choosing you every day, no matter how messy life gets. Thank you for loving me. Even when I was at my worst, we exchanged rings, and when the officiant finally said, "You may now kiss the bride," it felt like we were sealing not just our marriage, but the journey that had brought us here. The kiss was sweet, filled with the promise of a different kind of love, a love that had been challenged, forgiven, and redefined. The reception that followed was filled with laughter, heartfelt toasts, and a lot of dancing. The chaos of the past seemed far away, replaced by a deeper connection and a sense of peace. As we snuck away for a quiet moment together, Jessica leaned her head on my shoulder. "We made it," she said, a mix of relief and happiness in her voice. "Yeah," I agreed, squeezing her hand gently. "And it's just the beginning." We knew that life wasn't going to be perfect. There would still be misunderstandings, disagreements, and challenges. But now, we were ready for them, armed with the lessons we had learned and the love we had fought to preserve. In the end, our wedding wasn't just a celebration of our love. It was a testament to the resilience of two imperfect people who refused to give up on each other. We weren't aiming for a fairy tale. We were creating a real-life story, filled with flaws, forgiveness, and a lot of love. And that was more than enough.